Good suggestion, Lily. Yeah, I'm happy to kick it off, and hopefully we could get Carla's audio worked out. But well, great to see everyone. Thank you all for joining us for this town hall to hear really important updates on our Sunset Forward community planning process. The presentations this evening will summarize key information in the Sunset Forward Strategies report, which is really the culmination of this very important community process that kicked off 2 years ago at the very beginning of the pandemic. And the priority strategies highlighted tonight and detailed in the report are intended to address our district's needs around housing, small business and commercial corridor support, and also neighborhood services. And they will serve as a guide for much of my work as District 4 Supervisor in the coming months and years. I do want to really thank the Planning Department staff and also the District 4 Youth and Families Network leaders for all of your hard work and thoughtful work leading the Sunset Forward process. And I'd also like to thank the nearly 2,500 Sunset community members who contributed to Sunset Forward through surveys, focus groups, and numerous meetings over the past 2 years. We've learned so much about ourselves and our community during the pandemic: the need to house and protect our most vulnerable, the need for accessible neighborhood services, the need for outdoor space and social gathering spaces, the need to support our small businesses, and the need for safe and reliable public transit. And also, in light of the targeted violence against Asian Americans, the need for language appropriate services and safety for our immigrant communities. And at our core, the Sunset has always been a neighborhood of change, opening up opportunities for more people. The waves of Irish, Italian, and Chinese immigrants and others, a beacon for working and middle-class families. We can develop in ways that stabilize families here while welcoming new ones in, that combat income inequality, that create new opportunities for the community to come together. And we can plan in ways that feel empowering. I do want to just reread or restate the mission statement for Sunset Forward. Sunset Forward aims to stabilize low and moderate income families and seniors in the Sunset, enhancing community connection and quality of life for all by addressing unmet needs in housing, transportation, and neighborhood businesses and services. So this evening, you'll hear a lot of information that distills the feedback you've shared into strategies in 3 key areas: affordable housing for both homeowners and renters, support for small businesses and merchant corridors, and access to neighborhood services serving diverse groups, including youth, families, seniors, and immigrant households. We will continue engaging with you and our partners in order to achieve our goals in these critical areas. And it may seem like a really big undertaking, but I am committed to moving forward on new programs and policies that we've already started in tandem with this planning process. And so really looking forward to the presentations and the feedback and conversation at this town hall today. We're going to hear from the District 4 Youth and Families Network and our District 4 planners at the San Francisco Planning Department before going into questions. And you're welcome to share comments or questions in the chat, and my staff and the planning team will read them all. And if we don't have time to address them this evening, we will definitely follow up with you. So thanks again for joining this town hall, and for so many of you for contributing to the Sunset Forward process. And now I will turn it over to Carla de Mesa, who's a senior planner from the Planning Department, hopefully.
Hi, can everyone hear me?
Yep.
Okay, great.
Yes.
I really apologize for the technical issues. Thank you all for being flexible. I am logged in on my phone, so I apologize I don't have my video on. So this town hall will last 1 hour. It will be largely informational. We'll be covering a lot of content because we received a lot of feedback from the second round of outreach, and we want to make sure that we cover the high-level key takeaways. So the details that we don't cover tonight are in the Sunset Forward Strategies report, which we will link in the chat. We also invite community groups or organizations to let us know if you'd like to schedule a more in-depth presentation and discussion, and we're happy to arrange that. Tonight, we'll provide a brief overview of the Sunset Forward project, share a summary of the needs assessment findings, and share the community feedback we received on the draft strategies. We'll share some of the immediate next steps for implementation, and we'll end at 7:30. So given that we have a lot of content, we do want to ensure that you have the opportunity to ask questions. So we'll primarily use the chat to gather your questions, and we may have a few minutes at the end, but please post any questions you have in the chat. We'll email out the responses to the questions to all attendees in the town hall, as well as the Sunset Forward listserv shortly after tonight. And for those of you joining through the Chinese interpretation line, please ask your interpreter to post your question in the chat, and we'll include translated responses in the email back to everyone. And so we recognize that it's hard to sit through like an hour-long presentation, and we want to thank you in advance for your time and for joining us tonight, especially as the Golden State Warriors are playing. So we'll go ahead and get started. Next slide, please. Okay, so thank you so much, Supervisor Mar, for your opening remarks. And thank you for reminding us of the Sunset Forward mission. Another goal of Sunset Forward is to identify and elevate the Sunset community's needs and priorities and establish strategies that will help to enable the community, city agencies, and the District 4 office to work together to address the community's needs. For the planning department, our goal is also to establish relationships with the Sunset community and help increase participation in planning and other public processes, particularly for groups that are often underrepresented, including low-income families, youths, and seniors. The transportation component of Sunset Forward was the D4 mobility study, which was led by the San Francisco Transportation Authority. And that effort looked at transportation modes to improve health, livability, and economic vitality in District 4 while addressing climate change at the local level. And you can learn more about that effort by visiting sfcta.org. Next slide. So a little refresher of the Sunset Forward process and timeline. We launched this project in spring 2020. The first phase of Sunset Forward was a needs assessment. And through that, we hosted virtual focus groups, listening sessions, and an online survey to gather community needs and priorities around housing, small businesses, and neighborhood commercial corridors and neighborhood services. We then analyzed the needs assessment data and drafted potential strategies to address those needs. And the latest round of outreach gathered feedback on the draft strategies. So then based on that feedback, we further refined the strategies and created additional actions that could help implement them. The final Sunset Forward report can be found on the website, and implementation of these strategies will require resources, including funding and dedicated city staff, as well as coordination by city agencies, nonprofits, community groups, and the supervisor's office. Next slide. Oh, perfect. The Sunset Project team consists of the San Francisco Planning Department, the District 4 office, the San Francisco County Transportation Authority, and the District 4 Youth and Families Network. So now I'd like to invite Jessica, the Youth and Families Network Coordinator, to share some information about the network.
Hi, everyone. My name is Jessica Nguyen, here representing as the coordinator for the District 4 Youth and Family Network, which is a collaboration of Sunset-based nonprofits currently led by Wame School, Sunset Youth Services, Sunset Neighborhood Beacon Center, and the Asian Women's Resource Center. The network is rooted in the belief that enhancing the quality of life for our most vulnerable populations, for our young ones and families, will lead to a stronger and healthier community. And through honest relationships and strong partnerships, the District 4 Youth and Families Network aims to encourage community building and to find ways to increase the opportunities for diverse, low-income, and disenfranchised residents to live and thrive here in the Sunset, in part by ensuring that they have the ability and the access to participate in the processes of civic and community engagement, and by helping to amplify a voice that's often overlooked. The network has been partnering with SF Planning Department and Supervisor Mar's office to ensure that the populations of people that are often unheard from, such as the low income and working class and monolingual English speakers, are included and that their concerns are heard. So thanks to the many community efforts of a lot of Sunset orgs and residents, we were able to outreach across the district, providing focus groups in Cantonese, reaching transitional age youth, tenants, young families, and overall reaching a broader audience in the Sunset community. So we're very pleased to be a part of this process and hope that by doing so, the needs assessment will further represent or be further representative of everyone who considers the Sunset their home and their community.
Thank you, Jessica. Since we launched this project in spring 2020, we've had to adapt our outreach strategy to be almost completely virtual, but we were still able to engage with about 2,500 members of the Sunset community through the 2 phases of outreach. And with the help of the network, we engaged community members with high barriers to participation. We conducted focus groups in English and Chinese, and we also conducted surveys as well as listening sessions and held several town halls and community events. Next slide, please. So a closer look at this recent phase 2 outreach. We had an online survey, which we also conducted in person with seniors through Wame School and Self-Help for the Elderly. We had a handful of in-person community events once it was safe to do so. And the Youth and Families Network conducted 10 focus groups, engaging families, seniors, renters, and service providers. Next slide. The report will have more details on the survey demographics, so I'll just share some high-level key takeaways. The survey was open from October 2021 till the end of January. We had 307 participants or respondents to the survey, 85% of whom were Sunset residents. Most respondents were between the ages of 35 and 59. Over half identified as white, while 28% identified as Asian. 49% of the respondents own their home, while 35% rent. We had a wide range of income levels, but 35% reported household incomes of less than 100,000. So I'll now hand it over to Matt with the Sunset Beacon Center to share information on the focus group participants.
Thanks, Carla. For the focus group participants, we were able to get a diverse group of participants involved, as Carla just mentioned. And many of the needs that participants brought up and said they were really focusing on were around housing needs, engagement with the community. There were many participants who identified a need for services that were in their language, and also services that could potentially direct them to other services. Many participants were renters, and I myself am a Sunset resident and renter. And many people have expressed sort of an uncertainty with things that are going on right now that is a little intimidating. Yeah, that was sort of the general focus of the focus groups. It was a very good group of people, and I was grateful to be a part of it, but I only got to lead one focus group of the 30 or so that were led, so I will pass it on.
Thanks, Matt. Jessica?
Sorry, looking for the unmute button. So phase 1 of Sunset Forward was a needs assessment where we gathered feedback from the community around the needs for neighborhood services, small businesses, and commercial quarters and housing. As a network, we're looking at the themes that emerged out of the conversations around neighborhood services, which were the desire for an increased sense of community, an improved and expanded access to parks and open spaces, increased access to health and nutrition for low-income families, youth, and seniors, and the expansion of existing programs and neighborhood activities.
Thanks. And then for small businesses and commercial corridors, Sunset small business owners shared the need for stronger coordination and more predictable and timely permitting process. The general community expressed the desire for more diverse and affordable business offerings, as well as clean, vibrant, and safe commercial corridors. And then for housing, affordability was the biggest concern we heard. Low and middle income households are being pushed out of the Sunset due to high housing costs. And people shared that there's a lack of affordable housing options in the neighborhood, including 100% affordable housing, especially for seniors and families. People also shared that their housing needs change over time, but that the existing housing in the Sunset is limited and will likely not meet their future needs. There's been a growing sense of instability and insecurity among renters in the Sunset, and homeownership feels increasingly out of reach for many. Next slide. So we were going to do a quick interpretation break here to switch interpreters. Andy, are you able to actually make Karen the interpreter, or I'm sorry, Lauren? Thanks everyone for your flexibility with the tech issues. So before we go into the strategies, we're going to switch interpreters. So for participants on the Chinese line, if you'll be briefly placed back into the English line while we change interpreters. And then you'll need to go back into the Chinese line by clicking on the interpretation option at the bottom of your screen.
I'm not able to change the interpreter, unfortunately.
Okay, no problem. Shirley, I apologize. I think we are going to have to keep you as the interpreter, but this will be a good reminder for the presenters to please speak slowly and clearly so that Shirley will have an opportunity to interpret the presentation.
Carla, can you ask, can we have a brief explanation of how to get onto the interpretation line and ask a Chinese speaker to translate for folks how to get onto that line?
If Karen is able to make
Yes.
Okay,
I'm
you.
here, so I'm going to do it in Chinese. 咁如果咧係講中文嘅需要呢個翻譯服務嘅話咧，咁你會見到咧喺呢個 Zoom 我哋開會嗰度下邊咧有一啲標誌喺度嘅，咁有一個咧係地球個標誌。咁如果你需要中文翻譯嘅話咧，你撳咗個地球，然後你見到係English 同 Chinese 係中文同英文嘅，你就撳 Chinese 撳咗嗰個中文嗰個按鈕咧，你就會入咗去個翻譯頻道嗰度，咁就會有一個中文嘅人員翻譯，就係翻譯今日呢一個報告俾你聽嘅。
Great, thank you, Karen. Okay, next slide, please, Andy. So for neighborhood services, we asked community members to rank the top 3 strategies that should be prioritized. And for more details around the community's feedback, again, we put a link to the full report that is posted on the Sunset Forward website. For most of the strategies across all 3 categories, survey respondents and focus group participants were in alignment with how they identified priority strategies. So for this section, Jessica will share the top ranked strategies for neighborhood services.
Thank you, Carla. So for this first one, I think that we can all recognize the strain that COVID-19 put on our ability to feel close to people, to our families, and to our neighbors. So you can see why 64% of respondents wanted to build community connection through more community events as that top strategy. Next slide, please. For parks and open spaces, 60%. So the top rated strategy was to the maintenance of existing facilities to be prioritized was the top strategy for parks and open spaces. Next slide. For health and nutrition, the priority for these strategies is providing access to affordable and healthy food options for low-income seniors, youth, and families. And then the last theme to come out of the needs assessment was the desire to expand existing programs or to create new programs that serve the Sunset's most vulnerable groups. The report will include priority strategies for all groups, but for today, we'll share the top ones for seniors, families, and transitional aged youth. So the top priority in addressing senior needs would be establishing a neighborhood shuttle service for seniors and people with disabilities, which would make sense considering how large the Sunset District is. Thank you. For families with children, the priority in strategies is expanding affordable daycare after school, weekends, and summer programs for low and middle income families. And then lastly, the top priority strategies for transitional aged young adults would be expanding the support for non-college bound youth. So that could include access to housing, apprentice programs, and employment opportunities. I'll hand it to Ben.
Hi, Ben Wong, Wame School. Wame is part of the District 4 Youth and Family Network. I want to thank you all for being here. I want to, in addition to some of the content pieces that Jessica was sharing, there are some also global pieces that we wanted to share with you all. Obviously, the community concerns and ideas that we have around those pieces are critical to ensuring that this is fully sort of thought through and discussed. So we recognize there are some strengths obviously already in the neighborhood and community, but we did want to highlight some of the where some of the ideas are about how to continue to improve the neighborhood. And that includes obviously some community awareness, access to existing facilities and programs, and ensuring that there is adequate funding to meet the current and future demands of these facilities and programs. Next slide. So there is, I think there's a different slide. I do want to say that the network really shares the idea that we want to support, obviously, the pieces that are critical in these two slides around both the city's efforts, but also the neighborhood's efforts, or the community efforts, I should say. Many of the agencies provide a lot of the direct service that is supported around transportation, that is part of the Sunset Forward piece of this business plan and those pieces. There's also a need for the community side to focus on the additional supports that we would want to partner with the city on, with the planning department, obviously, and with the Supervisor Mar's office, in working to ensure that these things are effectively derived. Next slide. So a lot of this will come down to the resources. We want to make sure that there was efforts that they should know that there actually are work that we're actually doing in the network itself and in the community, but additional resources are needed to actually continue to support these pieces, both I think again on the city side, but also on the neighborhood side, to ensure that the community and the nonprofits can actually effectively deliver on these pieces. I think Carla is going to go next, and we're going to do some business, small business reporting.
Thanks, Ben. Thanks, Jessica. So we're going to focus on small businesses and the Sunset's commercial corridors. Like the neighborhood services, we asked the community to rank the top 3 strategies that they would like to see prioritized. Again, the report will include detailed community feedback, so I'll just cover the high-level takeaways. Next slide. So small business owners shared their struggles with navigating the city's permitting process and how restrictive land use rules prevented them from adapting to the pandemic in many ways. And community members shared a desire for more diversity and affordability of goods and services. The priority strategies around zoning and permitting focus on updating commercial zoning codes to allow for a variety of businesses to open and operate, encouraging the use of vacant commercial properties, and streamlining the permitting process. Next slide, please. Sorry. Apologies. Technical issues again. 1 second. So then in terms of the second category around strengthening coordination, a lot of small businesses shared with us the need for better coordination around navigating some of the city's changing rules and regulations, as well as a lot of community members wanted a way to know how to support local small businesses, especially during the pandemic. The priority strategies to strengthen coordination focus on encouraging more small business participation in community building events, supporting merchants associations, and providing opportunities for residents to get involved in activating the Sunset's public commercial corridors. Next slide. And Sunset community members are deeply invested in the health of their commercial corridors and would like to see increased safety, cleanliness, and vibrancy. This last category for the small businesses strategies focus on enhancing the public realm, including streets, sidewalks, and public spaces. Priority strategies focus on improving cleanliness, incorporating more greenery and local art. And there was actually a lot of feedback related to transportation around increasing traffic safety and access to public transportation and parking. So the feedback that was related to transportation were included in the report and were also shared with the SFCTA to incorporate it into the D4 mobility study and the strategies that came out of that. A few concerns and ideas that we heard that should be considered when implementing these strategies, which is the need for better coordination between city agencies that are responsible for permitting, safety, transportation, and keeping the streets and sidewalks clean. That the strategies should also include support for small home-based businesses, and the strategies should seek to increase community safety as well as addressing high commercial rents and vacant properties. Next slide. Lily, I think you're up.
Hi, folks. So my name is Lily. I'm here representing the Sunset Chinese Cultural District. So for context, the Cultural Districts is really an effort in placemaking and placekeeping in San Francisco. And our vision is to preserve, strengthen, and promote cultural communities and support legacy businesses, nonprofits, community arts, and tradition. So the Sunset Chinese Cultural District was recently launched at the end of last year, and we will have an economic development and stabilization effort to focus on preserving the legacy of longstanding Chinese businesses and also all businesses within our commercial corridors. Part of our work is working with the city to identify regulations and programs to support businesses and industries.
Thanks, Lily. And there have been several improvements to the city's support services for small businesses as well, including dedicating permit specialists and inspection ambassadors at the permit center to provide better guidance and support for small business owners, as well as Prop H improvements to increase coordination between city agencies in expediting the permit review process. The Office of Economic and Workforce Development has several grant opportunities for small businesses and community efforts to improve the commercial corridors. So through this effort, we will need to increase the Sunset community's awareness and access to these opportunities. Next slide. So while there's existing efforts underway, there's still much work to do that requires additional resources to implement some of the priority strategies, such as strengthening merchants associations, promoting small businesses, and improving the public realm. Next slide. So our last section covers the housing strategies. These strategies focus on the three main themes that came out of the needs assessment: to increase the need to increase affordable housing, the need for new housing of different types and sizes, and the need to provide more housing security and home ownership opportunities. And we recognize that there's no one-size-fits-all housing strategy that will address all of the Sunset's needs. So we've asked participants to rate their level of support for each of the housing strategies, as well as share their concerns and ideas for improvement. Next slide. The strategies to address the need for more affordable housing include building more affordable housing on mid to large sites in the Sunset, building affordable housing on publicly owned or former faith-based sites, creating and funding smaller scale affordable housing throughout the district, and purchasing rental buildings and making them permanently affordable. Community members showed overall support for all four strategies, with focus group participants having a stronger preference for housing on mid to large sites that can garner the most affordable units. Next slide. For the housing strategies, the planning department developed actions that could be implemented at the district level in the short, medium, and long term, and that could begin to lay a foundation for getting housing built and increasing housing security and stability in the Sunset. These actions are presented in more detail in the report, but at a high level, for affordable housing, the actions focus on identifying funding opportunities outside of the traditional financing model, identifying and securing sites that are feasible for affordable housing, ensuring that the zoning allows for affordable housing development, providing incentives to get more affordable housing built, helping the community better understand and engage in the housing development process, and finding creative solutions to build more affordable housing that meets the Sunset's needs. And to address the need for a greater diversity of different types of housing that serve mixed incomes, the strategies for new housing include building multifamily housing along transit and commercial corridors, building smaller multifamily housing throughout the neighborhood, creating an incentive program for homeowners, and building small multifamily housing, including ADUs, building more senior housing of all types throughout the district. The feedback we received showed overall support for all four strategies, with focus group participants having a stronger preference for housing along transit and commercial corridors, citing an increased sense of safety and better access to jobs, goods, and services. Next slide. So actions to help implement these strategies to build new housing focus on ensuring that the land use rules allow for new housing, including analyzing and making planning code and zoning changes as necessary, providing incentives for building more family-friendly housing, including those with 2 and 3 bedrooms, expanding access to existing programs that support seniors, and creating a program to incentivize homeowners to build small multifamily housing, increasing city coordination on transportation impacts from new housing development, and conducting further analysis and planning to meet the growing demand for senior housing. Next. And the last category, to increase housing security for vulnerable Sunset tenants and expanding homeownership opportunities to low and middle income households. Strategies include expanding access to existing renter support services to Sunset residents, exploring and creating a program that gives renters the opportunity to purchase their unit if the building is put up for sale, expanding homeownership opportunities in new and existing developments, as well as expanding access to existing homeownership assistance programs. Focus group and survey participants aligned in prioritizing strategies that provide homeownership opportunities. However, focus group participants were more supportive of strategies that focus on renter protections, likely because more focus group participants were renters, while the survey respondents skewed toward homeowners. Next slide. Many tenant support services and homeownership programs already exist in the Sunset and citywide. So a major theme that we heard out of the community's feedback for these specific set of strategies is to first ensure that Sunset residents are aware of these existing programs prior to creating new programs. So therefore, the actions related to increasing security and stability focus on increasing community awareness of tenant and property owner rights and responsibilities, increasing access to existing tenant services, including support through the below market rate application process, and access to the neighborhood and displaced tenant preference programs, as well as expanding access to the down payment assistance program and other related programs to support first-time homeowners. And then lastly, creating a comprehensive plan for expanding homeownership, including more creative models such as co-op housing and lease to own. Next slide. So the report lays out community concerns and ideas for each strategy in more detail, but the most common concerns that we heard about the housing strategies across the board was that these strategies really need to also address the need for moderate income housing or moderate income households. New housing needs to be family friendly. People shared that the senior housing strategy should also include options for seniors to age in place in their own homes. We also need to consider infrastructure and transportation impacts, as well as prevent displacement and negative impacts of gentrification with new housing development. Community members want to ensure that the affordable housing strategies, especially the ones on smaller multi-unit housing, are adequately funded, feasible, and that the approval process doesn't hinder affordability levels. Community services and community serving spaces should be prioritized with new housing development. And lastly, Sunset residents should be able to have access to new affordable housing, and long-term affordability should be a top priority. Next slide.
Hey, so I think this is me again. So from the cultural district's perspective or participation in this, under implementation, there are collaborative efforts in place to build capacity for housing on the West Side. We're very pleased to be a partner with Self-Help for the Elderly, which has been selected to be the lead on a cohort on affordable housing for District 1 and District 4. So that's the Richmond and Sunset communities. This cohort project is anticipated to begin in the coming months. Another piece is that the cultural district's work is deeply embedded in anti-displacement and identifying ways to support tenants, homeownership, and affordable housing.
Great. Thanks, Lily. Next. As for existing city efforts, as part of the housing element implementation, the planning department will launch outreach for the Housing Choices rezoning program this summer. This effort will analyze and consider zoning changes along commercial and transit corridors across various neighborhoods, including the Sunset. So we will be elevating the housing needs identified through Sunset Forward to ensure community priorities are addressed in that effort. So I'll be sharing more information and upcoming outreach events for the Housing Choices rezoning program with the Sunset Forward listserv. If you would like to be added to that email list, we'll include a link to sign up in the chat. Implementation of the housing element will also include efforts that build more affordable housing and housing for moderate incomes in neighborhoods, including the Sunset. As well, planning will continue to encourage developers to align project proposals with housing priorities that have been identified through the Sunset Forward process. The next slide. So while there's current efforts underway, again, there's a lot of work to do that will require additional resources, including implementing some of the strategies around funding for affordable housing, securing and dedicating lands, and building on public land and former faith-based sites, as well as expanding programs that support tenants and expand home ownership. So how do we move Sunset Forward forward? We've spent the past 2 years talking with the Sunset community about their needs and how to address them. So we need to make sure that this isn't just a plan with no action. The San Francisco Planning Department and the Youth and Families Network will continue to coordinate to monitor progress and report back our progress to hold ourselves accountable. The Sunset Forward listserv has close to 400 people signed up to receive updates, and the network will be disseminating updates through their member organizations. Through the survey, people indicated how they want to get involved with implementing these strategies. So we will also be reaching out to you soon with opportunities to get involved. We'll coordinate with city agencies and nonprofits to plug into existing efforts, such as the Sunset Chinese Cultural District, the West Side Capacity Building effort, and small business and commercial corridor improvement opportunities with OEWD. So we'd love to hear from you how you'd like to see progress and accountability from us. Feel free to place your comments in the chat. as well as let us know if you're interested in getting involved in some of the implementation efforts. I'll now turn it over to Supervisor Mar to share his office's next steps and conclude the presentation.
Great, thank you so much, Carla, again, and all of the D4 Youth and Families Network leaders for the presentation and the summary of the Sunset Forward process that was so intensive and comprehensive over the past 2 years. I just wanted to highlight some new projects and programs that we've already started implementing that are aligned with the priority strategies coming out of the Sunset Forward project. Like particularly around housing and affordable housing, I did want to highlight that we've been actively working to facilitate the Sunset's first 2 100% affordable housing developments. One for educators on 43rd near Judah, and one for low and moderate income families on Irving. And we're also working actively to facilitate other affordable housing developments, especially for seniors and moderate income households and essential workers. And we're particularly looking at a number of vacant church sites as potential opportunities for new affordable housing. Also, we've one of the priority strategies highlighted in the housing section of Sunset Forward was around supporting homeowners to expand their homes to meet the needs of extended families and seniors and aging older adult homeowners and community members that need housing. So I've been working already to I sponsored legislation and been working with the planning department and the Mayor's Office of Housing and Community Development to create the Housing Development Incentive Program for homeowners, which will provide technical assistance and financing assistance, and hopefully also streamline permitting for homeowners to add ADUs and also now consider duplexes to quadplexes as allowed by the new state and local laws. And finally, around housing for seniors and expanding housing for seniors in the Sunset was highlighted as a priority in Sunset Forward. So this is something I've been working on with senior groups, including Senior Power and Self-Help for the Elderly, on creating a housing master plan for seniors and people with disabilities that would really create for the first time a plan on how to create the full spectrum of housing options and needs that seniors and people with disabilities require in the Sunset and citywide. And then for the small business and commercial corridor recommendations or priorities, we did want to highlight a few things that we're already working on. I know for our small businesses and commercial corridors, public safety and safety on our commercial corridors was a key need and recommendation. So we've been working with our merchant associations on Taraval and Irving to create new public safety programs specifically for our commercial corridors. And they're part of our Sunset 5-point community safety plan that includes community safety ambassadors, increased foot patrols, and also senior escorts and other new safety programs on our commercial corridors. And we've also we've been continuing to support the Outer Sunset Farmers Market and Mercantile, which has been such a big success, launching during the pandemic, in supporting our neighborhood small businesses, and also really as a community building space. So we're working with Sunset Mercantile, the organizer of the farmers market, on expanding it with some exciting new ideas around arts activation and other things. Finally, I also wanted to highlight that this fall we're going to be launching a new Sunset Community Arts Initiative that aligns with a lot of the needs and priority strategies identified at Sunset Forward. And this will focus on expanding public art by neighborhood artists on our commercial corridors. And then finally, around neighborhood services and all of the important needs and recommendations that were highlighted in the report, just wanted to mention a few things that we're already working on. We're going to be relaunching the City College Sunset program this fall with expanded classes to meet the needs of the Sunset residents, and particularly a focus on child development classes to really train the workforce for preschools and daycare providers in our neighborhood and in the city. There's also going to be, this fall, we're going to be moving ahead with plans for a major renovation of one of our most important community facilities in the neighborhood, the South Sunset Clubhouse and Senior Center, where Self-Help for the Elderly provides nutritional programs and activities for older adults. And then there's also, did want to mention that there's major improvements, both short-term and long-term, planned for Sunset Boulevard, both greening and sort of improving the biodiversity of the boulevard, but also around community activation. And we've been working with Friends of Sunset Boulevard and Department of Public Works, as well as community partners like Climate Action Now and the California Native Plant Society on this work. That's really reflected in the Sunset Boulevard Master Plan. And then finally, I just wanted to mention that we've also moved forward, particularly out of the District 4 mobility study that was a part of the Sunset Board process, but really was captured in a separate report on some important new initiatives to make it more convenient, or really to provide more convenient transportation options for residents to get around the Sunset sustainably. So that includes the Sunset Neighborways Network, which will be a network of bicycle streets prioritized for bicycle and pedestrian traffic, and then also the Sunset Community Shuttle Service. So this will be a new public transit shuttle service that we're just going to start the business plan to create, that would allow Sunset residents to get to destinations by public transit more conveniently. So I just wanted to highlight that we've already started working on a number of important new initiatives and programs in the Sunset District that very much align with Sunset Forward's priorities, and we'll continue now that the full report is done. Thanks to all the work of Planning Department and District 4 Youth and Families Network, as well as all of you that have contributed to it. We'll definitely make it a priority and really use the Sunset Forward priority strategies as a guide for my priorities as a District 4 supervisor looking ahead. So thanks again. And maybe just to close, I did want to encourage all of you to continue to engage with us with your ideas on how we can make the Sunset, the best and the most vibrant neighborhood in the city. And there's so many great ideas that came through the Sunset Forward process over the last 2 years, but it doesn't end here. We really encourage you to continue engaging with us, with the Planning Department and District 4 Youth and Families Network. And you can contact my office, sign up for our office email newsletters that go out every month, and sign up for a district office hours if you have some ideas you want to talk to me about. I have district office hours every Friday afternoon and also on the first Sunday of the month. So, and Lee Lovett from my staff can post our contact information in the chat if you don't already have it. So
Thank you.
I'll turn it back over to you, Carla.
Thanks, Supervisor. Thank you so much for closing it out. We have a little over 5 minutes for questions. I was initially going to go to the interpretation line, but I just got a message from Shirley that she's having some audio issues. So I really apologize for the technical problems that we've had. I do want to sort of open it up to anyone that has a question about the process or any clarifying questions about any of the strategies. And I apologize, I'm unable to see the chat. So I'm wondering if Lauren or Andy, if you wouldn't mind just reading out maybe a couple.
Yeah, I can do that. I think there's a related question from Kim about why there isn't any 100% rent controlled housing being built, except for the project on Irving.
The strategies around 100% rent controlled housing.
Yeah, yeah. So if there could be a little bit more explanation around 100% rent controlled housing policy.
If maybe I could just add, it looks like Brian V posted this question, and the project on Irving and between 44th and 45th that he's mentioning is a very unique project where it's a major expansion of an existing building. I think, yeah, with 44 bedrooms and but it's all, it'll be rent controlled. It'll be rent controlled because it's not new construction. So, and I think that's pretty unique and rare, not just in the Sunset, but in the city.
Mhm. Yeah, okay. Thank you, Supervisor. I think there's one other question, just maybe our last question, related to infrastructure improvements and, you know, supporting additional housing in the neighborhood, and kind of if you all could speak a little bit more to the plan for that.
Yeah, I could respond to that. It looks like Lisa posted that question, and that's a really good question. You know, as we're, you know, new housing development is already happening in the Sunset. You know, there's yeah, a number of new projects that have been constructed. Actually, I think it's 8 now that have been either constructed, permitted, or proposed since I stepped in as supervisor in 2019. And it's going to continue, you know, as the city, you know, pushes to increase housing production to address the housing affordability crisis. But it's also, you know, I totally agree with Lisa that we need to ensure that we have adequate infrastructure in the neighborhood, and especially and not just in the Sunset, but on the west side, to really accommodate the new population, you know, that'll be increasing here. I think transportation is a really important part of that, and that's why Sunset Forward process was done sort of in coordination with the District 4 mobility study. So we're planning to meet the housing needs of the Sunset, while we're also planning to meet our transportation and transit needs as well at the same time. So it's been there's a priority also to increase transportation service in the Sunset. You know, I think you're all aware that the El Taravel improvement project, you know, is still moving forward. It's in phase 2 right now, from going from Sunset Boulevard to West Portal. But when that's completed in about 18 months, that's going to be a major improvement to the El Taravel service and improvement to the Taravel corridor. I'm also been pushing MTA to fast track a similar project for the NJUDA. It's called the NJUDA Forward. That has been sort of in the plans, but I'm really pushing them to really fast track that and get the NJUDA Forward project moving forward soon. And the transportation bond measure that's on the ballot, the MTA transportation bond in June, will provide funding to help fast track the NJUDA project. And finally, I did want to highlight, and I mentioned it in my remarks, that I'm also working to create a new neighborhood shuttle service in the Sunset. So a Sunset Community Shuttle that will make it easier for people to get around the neighborhood to their destinations by public transit. And I've requested that this service be, we consider doing it as an on-demand shuttle service, neighborhood shuttle service, like they have in Sacramento in 11 neighborhoods, where it's sort of an app-based service, and you could put in your destination. It's like an Uber or Lyft ride, but it's operated just within a neighborhood, and it's public transit. So we're just starting. I'm starting work with the County Transportation Authority to create a business plan for that by the middle of next year.
Thank you so much, Supervisor. We are at a minute before our end time, so I do want to be respectful of everybody's time this evening. Thank you so much for being flexible with the technical difficulties. Because our Chinese interpretation line was having issues, we are going to record this presentation in Chinese and post that onto the website, as well as this presentation and this recording as well. Thank you so much for your time. We are going to send you the answers to the questions that didn't get addressed tonight. And I will include my contact information for anybody who wants to continue this conversation or would like to have a more in-depth discussion about any of the strategies that we covered. Again, thank you so much. Have a great evening and go Warriors.
Yeah, thanks everyone. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.